This tutorial is designed for people who aren't so familiar with everything that reference managing software can do to help you when you're writing scientific reports. And because we've only got an hour, I won't probably have time to go into lots of detail about the individual functions of Mendeley. And the other reason why I decided also not to do that is because a lot of what I want to get across with the tutorial is about the functions that referencing managing software in general can do. And Mendeley is just one example of many, many reference managing software. I'm not even sure that Mendeley is the best one. There seems to be every year, there's like the new best reference managing software that comes out. But once you get used to one system and you have everything set up with one system, it takes at least a little bit of cognitive effort to switch to a new system. So I'm still with Mendeley. I know there are people out there who have heard about Zotero or Paperfile or other software systems, which is why I thought it doesn't make sense to spend too much detail showing you exactly how you change the formatting of the styles or exactly how you do this, that, the other. But if there's time at the end and you want to know about these specific functions in Mendeley, then that's totally fine. And I should say at the beginning, I don't claim to be a huge expert on reference managing software or Mendeley, but I have now used it for quite some time and really just want to make sure that everyone in our group is using some form of reference managing software when they're writing their bachelor's thesis or master's thesis or PhD theses, and that no one's manually typing up references and doing citations. So if by the end of this I can convince you all to use some sort of reference managing software, to download it today and make a start, then that will be really good goal achieved. And so there are kind of 5 sections to what I wanted to talk to you about. The first one is just how to manage, or what a reference managing software, what it looks like and what you can do with that and how you manage it. Then a bit about how do I get all of my references into this software? How do I then get those references into Word or another word processing program? Once I've got those in there, what happens if I want to change the format or the style of that? How do I do that? And then I've only got 12 slides, so I'm hoping there's time at the end if you guys have questions or problems. Maybe you even have tips. So it could be that some people have already started using reference managing software and have some answers or solutions to problems that I don't have. So feel free to exchange your tips there. So what is Mendeley? What is reference managing software at all? When I wrote my bachelor's thesis and master's thesis, it was still completely normal that you write up this big Word document that you manually insert. When you want to refer to a study, you just type the name of the authors into the main text in the brackets, and you made sure you did that in the right format. And then right at the end, you spent several days formatting the list of the bibliography at the end. And with a bachelor's thesis, it's sort of just about possible because you don't have so many references. But with a master's thesis, you then have a lot more references. And with a PhD thesis, I just can't imagine doing it manually. And so what reference managing software offers is primarily a way of automatically generating your bibliography and automatically generating the citations within the text. Mendeley itself is free, and it's an online reference managing software. So you essentially have a place to store studies that are in your field, and that storage system, that library, is online. So it's not in comparison with EndNote, and EndNote has an online function, but the main version of EndNote involves you saving a file, saving this library file onto a USB stick or your hard drive. And if you're then somewhere else for whatever reason, unless you have your USB stick with you, you can't access that library. And the advantage of these online reference managing softwares is that you have access to your library wherever you are. So if you're on the train going somewhere and you're reading you're reading something on your laptop and you think, oh, actually, I want to add that study to my database. It could be relevant for my master's thesis. You can do it. And when you get back home, you've got access to it again. So several functions, and these are just, in my opinion, the most important ones. So it's a place to organize your literature. And I'll show you in a bit more detail in a moment how you can create like subfolders within your main library for specific projects. And what I use it for is also for storing all of my PDFs. So it's the free version comes with a lot of storage space. I don't know how much exactly, but I have every study that is relevant to my research in my Mendeley library. And whenever I can, whenever I find a PDF of the study itself, you can attach that file to the entry in Mendeley. And then, so I don't keep PDFs anywhere else on my computer. Whenever I want to read a paper and I know I've got a copy of it already, I just open up Mendeley and read it there. And I mentioned that before, but it automatically generates a bibliography for you in your manuscript or report, which can be reformatted depending on style requirements. And so I guess it's not so obvious when you're writing your bachelor's or master's thesis why you would really ever need to change the style, because you know the style at the beginning. They tell you to format it, for example, in APA style, then just do that. But a lot of the times, master's thesis, you might want to publish the data afterwards, and you might want to take this document that you had for your master's and then reformat that for submission to a journal publisher, and they might have a different format. They might say, no, we don't want APA, we want Vancouver. And then with literally one button click, everything's reformatted. And it also automatically formats the in-text citations. So the different formats for references look differently in the main text of the manuscript. So some styles of referencing want you to put the first author and the second author, the year, and then put all of that in brackets. Others want you to number the references. And again, you can automate that process. And as I mentioned before, there are alternatives to Mendeley. So EndNote and RefWorks are two of the more old school ones. EndNote is the one that the Clinicum has the license for. So you have to buy a license for that one. It's the one that a lot of people in the Clinicum use, although I don't really know why, because there are free software that are actually, in my opinion, better than EndNote. So for example, Zotero, Citavi, Paperpile, just some of the ones, but Mendeley is the one I'm going to talk about today. So this is my little reminder to share my screen with you, to share my desktop. I just want to show you a bit what Mendeley then actually looks like. How does it look? So let me stop sharing the slides. So you have two options. No, that's my emails. You don't need to see that. Here. So do you all see this browser now with Mendeley in it? Yeah, so once you can register for an account with Mendeley for free, and then and you log into it up here, and the main function you use is this library function, and basically here I was trying to work out the other day how to see how many references I've got in there, because it doesn't show automatically, but I think there's several thousand references in here. This is my library, and at any given point, I can kind of just search through this. Let's say there's a really great paper by this Platt woman. Then, yeah, here's the paper I'm looking for. Here's a few details about it. And if I've saved a PDF, I can just click on that. And then I've got the PDF of the manuscript there. So this is just a kind of overview of what it looks like. If you want, you can search for just the recently added studies or recently read studies. You can favorite studies if you say these are particularly interesting ones. You can set up a list of my publications. So if you tag yourself in any papers that arise, you can see all of yours there. And then you can create kind of groups down here. So I think I started this a while ago. This is like a one for EcoWeb. And you can choose whether the things are private or public. I think these were actually all public groups before, but then Mendeley changed the data protection and they got automatically assigned to be private ones. But you can share these with other people, for example. So if I set up one on prevention of depression in youth with a high risk, I can share this with Vanessa. And if we wanted to, we could both then work collaboratively on this library. And I can see all of those when I go to all references. Essentially, each study has its own entry here. So that's what the browser looks like. And obviously you can access that anywhere you've got internet. And then there's also an app which works quite nicely. So you can download that on your computer. I have to say, I haven't tried using this on a phone or an iPad. So I can't say about that, but it works nicely on Mac and Windows PCs and laptops. And it looks kind of very similar. So this is the application itself. And yeah, very, very similar functions. You need to make sure every now and again that you use this sync button here, because essentially the central place for storing all of the studies is on the Mendeley server, which is what you're looking at when you open up the browser. And if I make changes now, let's say I made a change through the browser and added a study, it won't automatically sync with the application. So use this every now and again just to make sure that any studies you've added appear when you open up the application, and also vice versa. So if you're working in the application and you've added some new files, just hit refresh every now and again to make sure they then are uploaded onto the server. I think that direction happens a bit more automatically, but if you encounter any problems, you think, hey, I just added that, why is it not appearing? It's usually because you haven't refreshed. And you can sort these files, you can search, you can filter by author names, all the usual kind of search function things. Yeah, so that's the application and the browser. And let me then also just show you, I'm not going to go through any functionality, but let me just show you what it looks like in Word. So here's a document I created, and when you go to, you usually start on the home screen, but if you click on references, once you've installed this Mendeley plugin, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, you'll see this Mendeley symbol up here. And once you click on that, you'll be asked to sign in. And then you'll see kind of an overview. Okay, so I've got 2000 in my database. You'll see an overview here. And so let's say I want to cite this great paper. I'll click here. I'll say, yeah, this is the paper I want to cite. Insert one citation. Then it's in there, the citation, and it's in my bibliography. I'm going to go a bit more into detail about the functions of that in a minute, but just to give you an overview of what that looks like. Yeah. Any questions before? The next thing I'd do is just to go through the basics of all the things you need to download and install before you get started. But are there any sort of kind of basic questions so far?
I don't know if mine's basic, but I've been using Mendeley for the past week, and I cannot get the desktop version. I don't know why, but it logs me in through institution, so through LMU, and I cannot change that. I cannot set up a password. It just all happens automatically. So I don't know what I've done while setting it up. And I cannot log on to the desktop version because it doesn't support the institutional login. Yeah. So if anybody has any idea how to fix that, that would be very helpful.
Are you doing all of this through the browser?
Yeah, so I set it up through the browser, and I must have tried it, I think maybe after your lecture last year or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I never used it. And maybe it was just because of that I never used it, because it didn't sync between my desk. I couldn't get it on my lap, just the desktop version. And it's not a big drama, it's still usable, but just
Yeah,
don't
no, it's
understand
definitely
what's
better to
happening.
have the desktop version. And if you go here,
Hmm.
sign out.
It just, then when I sign in, it doesn't ask me for a password. It just asks me for signing in through my institution. And then when I click on sign in another way or something like that, it then always kind of loops back to then being
I'm sure we can
institutional
find a
login.
solution, Maggie. I'm sure we can find a
Yeah,
solution.
if anything, I'll call the support, or I'll message the support there. But I was just wondering if you knew about this or have had this issue before.
I've not come across that, but I'll have you, if that's okay, at the end, get you to just share your screen, and we'll see if
Hmm.
we can like walk through there and walk through a
Hmm.
solution.
Yeah.
Because I think
Okay.
essentially your account is always tied to an email address. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's have a look afterwards and see if we can find a
Hmm.
solution.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? So yeah, these are kind of the basic steps you need to go through, just to give you an overview. And I've linked in things here, so you can just, I'll send you the slides afterwards. You can just click on there and get redirected to the right places. So you need to register for an account with Mendeley, although obviously I have a huge interest actually in people, while they're in the research group, also using my account. So either you set up your own account and we could join up kind of projects and collaborate on projects. But what the practicanten, for example, up to now have always done is to just log in with my account details, my email address and my password, and then add studies to there. And then you can always use that yourself when you're writing reports. Just wanted to mention it, but if you want to register yourself with your own account, that's the link where you do that. And then I would really recommend, like Maggie just mentioned now, to download Mendeley, the application, to your desktop. So you can do everything through the browser, but it's a bit clunky and the app is a bit more sleek. And then what you obviously need to do as well is to download the necessary plugins for working with Microsoft Word or the Mac equivalent. And I have heard that some reference managing software, and I think maybe Mendeley as well, also works for people using BibTeX or LaTeX. Some people use to, like alternatives to Word. And I think it works with that as well, but I'm not 100% sure. What I'm going to talk to you at the moment today is the integration with Word, assuming most people are using Word as their main word processing software. So they're in a bit of transition at the moment at Mendeley. There was this kind of citation plugin that was previously the main link between Word and Mendeley, but I always found that didn't work very well with iOS. So I always previously had to kind of use my computer at work, which is Windows, if I wanted to format references or format Word documents, which was a bit of a pain. And more recently, they've created a new kind of plugin called Mendeley Site, and that seems to work much better with iOS. So that's the one I also showed you earlier, the interface with Word, where the Mendeley screen then appears on the right-hand side of your Word document. So now whenever I start a new document, I would always set it up with Mendeley Site. But yeah, for some of the older manuscripts that were submitted 9 months ago and I need to revise now, they were all formatted with this one. Sometimes you might still come across this. In any case, install one of these kind of plugins for Word. And then there's a nice little tool that Mendeley has for directly importing references into Mendeley from anywhere on the internet. So basically, when you open up your browser, and if you come to a website where a scientific study is reported, you can use this little Mendeley plugin to directly import that into Mendeley. And I'll show you a bit how that works in a minute. So this web importer isn't essential at all. but is a nice addition and makes things a bit easier. Okay, any questions there about installation, getting started? Fairly self-explanatory. Yeah, and so I mentioned this before. You can use the database to have private or public groups so that you can organize studies into specific themes. To be honest, I haven't personally used that much, because I think it only really works if you've got a team of people who are all using the same reference managing software, all using Mendeley, and there's an obvious need to share, and that hasn't been the case so far. So I tend to just use it as a way, just one place for having all of my studies. And I tend to use at the moment like this Google spreadsheet for organizing my studies into projects or topics a bit. But that's a personal preference how you use it. And then you can attach PDFs, like I mentioned. When you'll get used to just importing references automatically into Mendeley, so you don't have to like type them up, all of the 15 authors of the paper, the year, the journal, the issue, the page numbers. You don't have to add all that stuff in manually. You generally add that in automatically. And sometimes there might be errors that occur in that importation process and it's missed out the issue number, for example. You can use Mendeley to go in there and just manually edit anything you need to. It's got a search function, and you can import and export references from other systems. So if you're working on a review with some colleagues and they've used EndNote and you want to start using Mendeley instead, you can import a whole library from one reference managing software into another super easily. But what I always would recommend is that you keep your library updated, because if you keep it updated when you come to write your master's thesis, for example, you can straight away start with adding the studies into Word, into your Word document. But if you first have to go and find all of each of the studies that you're citing and then import them into Mendeley, that's kind of what takes up the most amount of time. And if you can do that as you go, every time you read a study or when you're doing your literature search, just add it to Mendeley. And then when you come to do the referencing at the end, it will make it a lot easier for you. And so I'm super grateful that Anna has basically been doing this on a weekly basis for me. So I set up weekly alerts with PubMed with search criteria for the studies I'm interested in. And when those alerts come through and I have 5 new studies about cognitive biases, for example, Anna will then import those into Mendeley. And so I mentioned this a bit before, but there's 3 ways that you can import references into Mendeley, that you can fill up your library, basically. One is manually adding them in. Let me just show you what that looks like. So I've got here I've got the app open, and just go to, do you see the app, by the way, now? You can still see my screen well? Someone just give me a quick sign. Tanya's nodding, good. Yeah, so we'll go to add new and then add manual entry. And then you can choose here what type of entry is. What are you adding? Okay, I'm adding a book here. What's the title of the book? Everything about psychology. Who are the authors? What year was it published? I can add all the things here manually. You need to add the city, the publisher, the DOI, those sorts of things. I click on add entry. And now when I go to all of my references, I can see I've got a new entry here. Tonya Fromholt's book about psychology. And then when I go to, let me just click on refresh just to make sure that's in. Making it sound more Scottish, it's true. So let's say I want to add in here the new study. Please let this work. Okay, so it hasn't updated. Refresh references. Oh, there it is. So I type that, insert the citation. Then I can see it's appeared here in the main text, and it's appeared down here in my reference list. So that's a way of manually adding things. And it's good for book chapters and whole books because they don't always appear online, but it's quite prone to error and it's very time consuming to add all of your references like that. You can also, if you see a study published on a journal website, sometimes they have the option of installing that into Mendeley. So let me look at that. That might look like, so I might see, yeah, I might want to add this study that I've just found into my Mendeley database, and you can see that they've got this function here, add to Mendeley. And then you'll be prompted to sign into Mendeley. Okay, and then it's suggesting that this is the one you want to add, although it's noted that there are a few other references it can find on this page, probably because there's some things mentioned up here and probably in the references list. But assuming that's the one you definitely want to add, you just click on add. And then when you refresh in Mendeley, I didn't even need to refresh, it's appeared automatically. I can see it's come up here. And when it can, it'll upload a full text PDF with it. So if you're lucky enough to be inserting a study that's completely fully green open access, it'll attach the PDF file automatically into the Mendeley entry, but that's usually not the case. So you usually have to manually go and find that and attach it yourself. So that's option number 2, going to the journal website. And I mentioned it before, there's also this Mendeley web importer. So the other option you have when you're in your browser, and let's say for whatever reason, it's a study that doesn't have this direct import Mendeley functions. Not all of them have this nice little button here. Let's say it's a study without that. I don't know, maybe the other one. Or let's say we're here on PubMed. I've installed the plugin and it looks like this. It's a tiny little symbol up here in the top right corner. And basically what that does is search the current web page you're on for anything that looks like it might be a reference to a study. So you just need to click on that button and automatically this Mendeley window will appear up here. And it says, is this the one that you want to add? And again, it's found a few others. So I always do just check that it's found the right thing. But it seems to have done that. And then I can just click on add. And at that point, you also have the option to add it to a different group. So if I say I already know that I want to add it to the EcoWeb mobile sensing group, I can click on that and add it. But I usually tend to just add it generally to my library. And you can add more than one at once. So if you say, oh, I want to add this one and this one as well, they will look great. I just click on add. You can see the little number comes up here. It's working, it's doing something. It does take a few seconds sometimes. So then when I open up my, and again, this time I didn't need to refresh it. They've kind of automatically appeared up here. But sometimes you will need to refresh it first. I click on one of those studies and I can see that for this one, this study of anchors, it's important, it's found a full text because it's fully open access. So I just click on that and now I've got the PDF kind of permanently in my Mendeley database. Yeah. So those are your 3 options for getting things into Mendeley. Do you have any questions about that? I'll pour myself some water.
Maybe just to check that I got it right. So if I, I'm really happy to share to use your Mendeley and update the CBMI stuff on there. But if I don't, if something doesn't fit into CBMI, like it's just a general paper about like, I don't know, one of the instruments I'm using or something, then you just add it to the general library rather than like
Yeah.
a group?
The general library contains everything, also the things that are in the sub-projects. But if you want to then specifically look at within the sub-projects, you've got the option to click on that, but everything will automatically appear in this like list of all references, basically.
Okay, and
So,
you can
yeah.
just add to general library without choosing group.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would add something like paper about like the CS instrument into just general library.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just import it without identifying a subgroup, and then it's in there.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I've got some slides here that kind of show you how to do what I've just explained, basically. Yeah, and I mentioned this before, but there's the kind of this is what the old version looks like here, this web importer for Word. So yeah, this is what it used to look like, the old version. And there you would just click on this kind of insert citation when you were at the point in the text when you wanted to add something, and it'll automatically open up the Mendeley app for you. Here you can then change the style. You can insert the bibliography. That's the old version. I won't go into too much detail about that because you'll probably mostly be using the new version. And obviously this now appears behind here, but this is what the new version looks like with this Mendeley Cite button on the right-hand side. I've shown you both of those. Yeah, and again, here, a couple of references when it comes, a couple of tips when it comes to your Word document. I would always recommend that when you open up a new Word document to start writing a report, I always start by adding the citations in right from the beginning, because it'll take you, it's true, it'll take you a few more seconds than it would do to just put manually like Platin Dancer 2021 in brackets. But then once you've got this linkage done, you don't have to do it ever again. So I would try and do that as you write, rather than writing the whole document and at the end going through and adding things in. And you can then use Mendeley to edit those citations. Let's say you realize you've inserted the wrong study in there, the wrong source in there. You can go back and edit that. You can go and add it. You say, I've got another paper I want to cite at that exact point. You can add them, and then you can change the citation style. So let me just show you what that would look like in Word, again with the new one. So, and again, I've only been using this version of the Word plugin for a week or so, so I'm not super familiar with it. But let's say at the beginning I've cited one of Anchor's papers, and actually I want to cite another paper there. Click within this little box that appears and search for the study. And I say, okay, and I don't only want to report this recognition of emotional faces one, I also want to cite this one here. Click on that, and it's added it. You can see an overview up here of all the ones that will appear at this point in the text. Save your changes, and it's automatically added the second one, and it's reformatted the list of references, the bibliography at the end to also include that study. And so you can add ones there. At some point, if I decided here, oh, I've got two, and actually I didn't mean to add that second one, I can just delete that, save the changes. And again, that happens automatically here, and then also in the bibliography. But if you want to change, if you notice, oh, there's a study here, but there's an author missing, don't do anything manually in the Word document itself. Always change references at the main source. So either in the browser, Mendeley, or in the app, go back and say, oh, look, there's an author missing here, and add them in yourself there. Always change anything to do with the referencing in Mendeley or whatever reference manager you're using, and not here, because if I just manually add in like another one here and another one here. It's okay for now, but when I add new studies, this all won't automatically regenerate. So don't do that. Yeah, when you're using reference managing software, little problems can always occur. I think no one's ever used a reference managing software and found that everything's functioned 100% perfectly all the time. So I always go through and just check my reference list if the things look roughly rightly formatted. So here I can see, yeah, it's in italics, the journal name, and I've got bold for the volume or the issue. The years appearing at the end how I wanted. Everything seems to be quite nice, but if you do spot mistakes there, it's better to spot them early and make changes rather than waiting right until the end of the day before you're due to submit your thesis. I mentioned this before, don't make manual changes to the Word document. It's always really tempting, especially if you think, oh, this is definitely the last change I'm going to make, because you can guarantee it won't be the last change you make. And if you, like I said, if you want to take the same document and then use it for different purposes, it's really important these automatic links between Word and Mendeley are in there. And I mentioned this before, but problems usually arise because the original reference in the Mendeley database is wrong. So, for example, here, maybe this book wasn't called Everything About Psychology, it was called Everything About Clinical Psychology. Then always go back to Mendeley, find it, make the change here. I think it automatically saves when you click away. It's syncing, as you can see up here, and it says it's already synced again now. So now when I go back to my document and I remind myself how to, refresh references. Now the real title is in there. So usually if something's gone wrong, it's not something the Mendeley's done wrong, it's the original entry in the reference managing software. Just while we're here, you can also see, so when I'm on this tab, I have the option of adding new references. And when I click on citation style, I have the option to change the format. So at the moment they're formatted, I think, with APA. And maybe let's say I want to try APA 7th edition. Actually, I don't think it was APA, it was Nature before. Click on that and update it. And now you can see at all of those points, it's now referencing differently in the main text, and the list of the bibliography list has been changed. And here's a list of the most common styles that you'll need, but you can also select other styles here. I don't know what other styles you can think of. Yeah, and you can add a custom style if you want to. But those are all more fancy functions that you probably won't need, and you can probably find out by Googling. So yeah, just do keep up a check because things don't always run perfectly. Yeah, so to summarize, my recommendation is to set up a reference managing software of some kind right at the beginning of a project. Don't wait until you're at the point where you're submitting your thesis. Do it right at the beginning. Import references into your library regularly as you go, and whenever you can, try and save the PDF there. Again, it takes you, at the time, it takes you a few more seconds or minutes to do that, but it's really worth it. You'll be so grateful at the end when you're finalizing your report and you just want to go and check what that study exactly, which task they exactly use. You can just pick up this PDF super quickly. Again, also insert the references into your Word document as you go. And I pretty much taught myself everything I know about reference managing software by just Googling. So none of it is really super tricky, and most problems other people have had before. So just Google if you're having problems. They have got some online tutorials on the Mendeley website. But yeah, that's usually the way I solve most of my problems. But also you guys can always come to me. Yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to say, the most of the input I wanted to give you. And now I would just suggest if you guys have any questions, and we can also look at Maggie's issue, now's the time.